Hello and welcome to episode 6 of my Mindset Tips series. Now, if you are new to this series, I highly recommend checking out the introduction. Link is up here, also in the text description. Just a reminder, this is not a sports psychology course. These are individual tips that can be used in all sorts of situations, not just sport, not just squash, tennis or other types of racket sports, they're useful, but also business and perhaps life. So this is episode 6. So let's get started. Tip number 21. Often you don't have to get better, you just have to get more consistent. I'm sure that when you're playing squash or performing an action, that the best you can do it is actually pretty good. The question is though, how often can you do it at that level? Now, when we talk about getting better, we think that we have to get the ball tighter and tighter, and that's not true. Not everybody thinks that, but it's often the case. If you can hit the ball like that 90% of the time, that's much better than hitting the ball this tight to the wall 10% of the time, and then this time of this away from the ball the rest of the time. The consistency of being always tight, always having your drops go short, taking the ball earlier without giving your opponent too many opportunities. What you need to focus on is removing the bad shots. Don't worry about getting your best shot better. Just think about getting your average shot better. That's all we need to do, the consistency. Some days you'll feel really fit, other days not so fit. If you can make the days when you are not so fit or feeling not so fit less often, further in between, not so important, then you won't necessarily be getting fitter, faster, stronger, but you'll be making the days when you aren't less often. So consistency is key. Now, consistency is not just in performance, it's in practice, it's in training. If you want to get better, if you want to increase your consistency, you have to increase your consistency of training. And I've mentioned this before, you shouldn't always be thinking, I'm going to train at 110%. You sort of see those people, the champion's mindset, everything has to be 110%. The reality is that my videos are for club players, people who have lives where they've got to worry about other things. And training at 110% is not only not possible, it's detrimental. I recommend training at 80% for a much longer period of time, and I don't mean individual sessions, I mean over weeks and months. I've often seen club players, they train hard for maybe a week, maybe 10 days, but then they get injured or they lose their motivation because each training session is so hard. If you build up slowly, when you do train nearer your maximum, the next day you'll be better able to control it. So I've moved on from the original topic, but the key point is you don't have to increase the quality, you just have to reduce the amount of weak shots you play, thereby increasing your consistency. Tip number 22 is develop a pre-match routine. Now what that might mean is it might mean getting to the club at a particular time. For example, I've always found getting to the club too early makes it worse for me. I've got too much time, and having too much time is not necessarily good. Now, of course, the extreme is you don't want to arrive 5 minutes before your match. You need to find a time to arrive before your match that works for you, that allows you to get changed in the way that you want to get changed, allows you to heat up in the way that you like to heat up, with a group of people perhaps, separately from other people. You need to find what works for you. But I don't want that to then turn into superstition or the idea that, oh my God, I didn't do my normal routine. Panic, I'm going to play terrible. No. The pre-match routine is to help calm your nerves and improve your chances of playing well. But there are many times when you can't do that and you still have to do your best. So don't become dependent on that pre-match routine, but try to include it, try to develop it if you can. You will need to experiment. What works for me might not work for you. What works for you might not work for somebody else. So try a few different variations, and that includes what you eat, how much you drink, how much you think about squash before, Maybe it's too much, maybe you shouldn't be thinking about it. I know people who play video games and that actually helps them because they're not worried about it, they're not thinking about it. So try to develop something that works for you, experiment, ask other people what they do, but don't become dependent on it because you won't always be able to follow it. Tip number 23, treat every single training session as seriously as you would a match. Now, I want to sort of add a little point here is that some training sessions you can relax and just have a little bit of fun. Yes, you can. But what I'm really trying to get across here, what I'm really trying to communicate is you can't relax all of the times that you're training and practicing and then suddenly expect to have your poker face, your game face on when you play. You are not a machine. You cannot switch it on and off. You need to become more accustomed that when you go on court and you have a training session with somebody, don't talk. Take everything, every point as seriously as you would in a real match. And there are some routines where you can score those routines. I'm not suggesting that everything has to be scored. I'm not suggesting everything has to be competitive because it doesn't. But you do need to take it seriously. You can't flip your switch between, oh yeah, that was a great shot, and then suddenly going back in. Some people can't do that. Maybe you're the kind of person who can. I'm not. I tend to find that most people, they need to keep focused because once you've broken your concentration, getting it started again is really difficult for some people. Maybe some of the older viewers will recognize this reference, the younger ones won't. But in the 1980s, there were two tennis players called John McEnroe and Bjorn Borg, and they were kind of like the total opposite, both in the way they played and both in the way they behaved and the mental approach. Bjorn Borg was very silent, didn't really show much emotion, focused, just used to do what he did, whereas John McEnroe needed to get himself excited, needed the crowd, needed those people. And I'm not judging or, criticizing any of those approaches, but I found that club players, it's much easier to be a Bjorn Borg than it is to be a John McEnroe because getting back into concentration after you've lost it and you've shouted and you've thrown your racket around is really, really hard. So take the training sessions really seriously. You will become more mentally accustomed to the idea of getting on court. I've got to do my job. I've got to play these types of shots. I've got to take it seriously. Now, if you're just a recreational player, that's no problem. Chances are, if you are a recreational player, you're probably not watching these mindset tips anyway. These are for club players or amateurs who really want to improve. So that was tip 23. Tip number 24, use cue words. Now, I can't find this racket. I think it's with one of the restringers that I'm friendly with. But what I used to do is I used to put a little bit of masking tape. Masking tape is that very normally cream coloured that decorators use. It comes in different widths. You can find it in a thinner width. I mean, I've got my antique collection showing here, but it fits on normal rackets. Put it down the side, and then with a marker pen, a Sharpie seems to be the common phrase now, I would write some cue words. Watch the ball hit my strings. Get back to the tee. Just particular phrases, not too many, and it doesn't have to be on the racket, but that was just an example. So a cue phrase is the idea of repeating positive language that helps you. So some people would be, get back to the tee. Watch my opponent when he's at the back. Whatever you choose is up to you. Rack it up early. Short swings on the volley. Something that when you've finished a point, you just look down and you see it and it reminds you. Now, it doesn't have to be the racket, as I just said. You can repeat it to yourself, but choose the cue words, think about the cue words, select the cue words that work for you. This is simply positive reinforcement. When I was much younger, this used to be called self-hypnosis. Okay, it's not like watch the watch, no. It's just, if you repeat all of the positive things, the things that make you feel better, the things that help you concentrate, one, you'll believe them. I do hit the ball, I do watch the ball hit my strings. I can do these things. Secondly, if you're saying these things, then you're not saying the negative things, the things that are counterproductive, the things that are ineffective. Now, they don't always have to be negative. They might just be questions. Can I really get the ball out of the corner? Now, that's a question, but of course it has a negative energy. So If you're saying positive things, then you're not thinking negative or questionable or ineffective things. So think about those cue words, write them in the comments, and we can maybe I can help you adjust them. So that was episode 6 of the Mindset Tips. Tip number 21, 2, 3, and 4. Now on the screen at the moment is a subscription button. If and only if you think that my content is useful, please consider subscribing. There's also a playlist of the other mindset tips available and a video that YouTube thinks is a good fit for you based on what you've been watching. And remember, do something every single day to improve your squash. See ya.